Reading CVs to identify talent. CVs should be read with both the head and the heart. Reading with the head means looking at the specifics regarding qualifications and experience, and if you are matching a candidate to a job assignment, looking for matches between the candidate's core competencies and the job requirements. The key to reading CVs from the heart is to realize that a CV is a story about a person. Although a CV can be quite sterile and formulaic, there is a living being behind how the information has been constructed and presented. Because CVs can be so formal, and because the temperament of people servicing certain industries such as engineering may favor the analytical and logical, it can sometimes be hard to see the person behind the CV. The style of presentation, the things that are focused on, highlighted or foregrounded, and the choice of words used, all are clues and indicators of personality and character, and can be a source of useful information, especially when candidates may be less forthcoming about who they are and what makes them tick as unique individuals. For example, some candidates put their current position first while others put their first position first. This is potentially revealing information. Ask yourself, what does this tell me about this candidate? It may be that putting the first position first indicates that the candidate is very aware of their career progression and values it. Or it may be that they are more proud of where they started than where they are now. Putting the current position first may mean that the candidate is less concerned with the progression and more focused on the present, the value they can and want to offer now. There are no hard and fast rules to interpreting information in this way, the trick is to trust or gut. A golden rule in body language is to observe clusters and context, and this rule is particularly useful when applied to reading CVs with both the head and the heart. Clusters refer to the potential meaning inherent in clues such as style, format, focus and what is highlighted, and context means always considering these clues within the bigger picture and to beware of seeing them in isolation. Everything is interconnected. For example, you may notice a cluster of clues in the fact that a certain candidate has moved more often than is the norm. In isolation, this may indicate a number of things. The candidate is confused as to his or her direction and career trajectory and moves indiscriminately and for the wrong reasons. The candidate may be in the wrong job. The candidate runs away from problems, always blaming the company, colleagues or position for his or her discomfort instead of taking responsibility for his or her own role in creating the sense of unhappiness and discontent. The candidate may be stubborn and refuse to change him or herself. The candidate may be difficult to get along with and may be pressured by colleagues into leaving. The candidate may be impossible to satisfy and always wants more. It may be that every movement is for a better paycheck, and that a drive for financial prosperity is driving the movement. All of the above are valid possibilities and some of them may indeed be accurate. But to determine more clearly the true reasons for the candidate's mobility, the rest of the CV needs to be scouted for clues. The bigger picture of this specific candidate needs to be observed. Who is this person specifically? For example, on taking the whole CV into account, it may become evident that while the candidate moves a lot, the movements are always up the ladder, albeit small steps at a time. The candidate may be exceptionally driven with an extremely high aptitude for learning. He or she grows faster than other candidates and so might also get bored quickly when understimulated. Or perhaps the candidate might have a great deal of responsibility to family and loved ones, which includes severe financial obligation, and so movements for money are driven by the need to provide as opposed to greed. As you read the CV, look for the pertinent and relevant information, but also keep your intuition open. Be aware of feelings that arise within you, shifts in your inner state evoked by certain information and how it is presented. Read what is on the lines but also what lies between the lines. To begin with, glance at the CV visually, scan it and see the format. Get a feel for how it is laid and where to find the various categories of information. Very important information is always experience and qualifications, track record, achievements and contributions to industry. The companies a candidate has worked for also tells an important story. Some companies only employ the best. Some companies offer more scope for promotion. Was the candidate promoted within the business when there were opportunities for career progression? If not, why? Some companies are larger. Does the candidate have experience working in large infrastructure, or is he or she more accustomed to smaller groups? If you are matching a CV to a specific job assignment, be sure to be familiar with the specifications and requirements of the position, including KPIs, responsibilities and accountabilities. With the relevant criteria in hand, first qualify the CV from this point of view. Once you have a framework with regards to the critical information, and if a good match seems likely, go into more detail. It is important to make notes during the course of reading CVs, observing possible pitfalls and red flags that might arise. Note your gut feelings as well, and then follow up with the candidate during the course of the interview to fill in all the gaps you have observed, making sure you feel absolutely confident that the candidate will move for the right opportunity and that you can present him or her in the best light possible. Here are some pointers for reading CVs. When looking at the organogram of their career progression, take a look at details like where he or she worked during vacation or studies. This can often reveal insights into passions and also gives a sense of career track record. In some cases it may appear as though a candidate has moved companies, while in truth they have simply changed divisions within a group of companies. If the candidate simply changed divisions within the same company, but has grown and advanced, this is a good sign. It is important to look for growth and progression. If they have been in the same company in the same position for years, they will likely be petrified of change and may prove a challenging placement to make. Only really conservative consulting firms still encourage long-term commitment of this nature. They get buy-in from employees as partners. If the candidate has stayed put, then assess whether this is the case. Also, is the candidate moving now because he or she wants to, or because their hand has been forced by retrenchment or other factors? In other words, I am moving because I want to, versus I am moving because I have to. If a candidate has been in a parastatal or government, it is wise to exercise some caution with them unless they show progression and leadership capabilities. Remember that the longer a candidate is subjected to a single culture, the harder it is for him or her to make a transition. It can be difficult to move from a mining house into the corporate world, especially on a high package. It is hard to get a similar package. Candidates that move a lot may do so due to monetary reasons, or it may mean that such candidates are seeking industry experience and want to grow quickly. They just want to learn. Be aware that frequent movements don't always mean a lousy track record. When you look at the career progression, you want to see promotion. Lateral movements are also fine, but you don't want to see downward movements from an organogram perspective. If the candidate has been a general manager or CEO, look deeper. Did he or she manage 3 people or 100? In terms of capability and experience, this difference is enormous. If you are matching to a job assignment, consider the accountabilities and size of the operation the candidate will be expected to manage. If they have worked in a large operation, can they shift to a smaller business where they will have to do their own admin and lack access to personal assistants, etc.? Top-notch companies tend to brainwash their employees with their own values and culture. Such candidates may at times prove difficult and might struggle to make a transition to a new context where the values differ. Young, high-caliber employees that have never moved before often accept a counter-offer when they want to move, as the loyalty issue comes up. These candidates need to be nurtured and prepared for resignation right from the beginning. It may be necessary to explain to the client that the candidate may have difficulty leaving, and to get the client in on the process, to reassure the candidate, and invite him or her into the family. Take note of qualifications that have not been completed. What has been the duration of study? When does the candidate propose he or she will complete? Always look for gaps in years and months when studies were postponed or set aside. Consider what the candidate was busy with during these times. Ultimately, it is better to refrain from putting pending studies on a CV, especially when they have been engaged for what seems like a long time. For completed studies, did they complete a degree in the proposed 4 years? If it took longer, why? In some cases, taking longer might be a negative thing. However, it can at times be a positive. If a candidate was paying for his or her own tuition and had to take a break year to generate the necessary funds to continue and complete, this indicates determination and initiative. Always try to get to the reasons behind things. When working with graduates, carefully consider their academic results and look for signs of leadership potential manifesting where appropriate. Was the candidate the captain of a sports team, a committee member or chairperson, etc.? Consider carefully the candidate's industry experience. Has he or she worked across the spectrum of the value chain? Does he or she have a career trajectory that encompasses the big picture of his or her chosen field? This information will assist you in giving career guidance to the candidate. If he or she has not seen the big picture, you can help to illustrate it. Try to observe cycles in the candidate's career movements. These are often industry-specific and should be viewed in context. Movements of 4 to 6 years are common in engineering and can be taken as a good sign, indicating a good track record of progressive growth. However, in IT for example, movements tend to be in shorter increments of 2 years. Salary is always a good yardstick to use when assessing the weight of a candidate. For example, if the candidate's current salary is $400,000, but the open position is $1 million, then it is not a good match. Always note where a candidate is located geographically relative to the location of the open position. Try to determine, based on what the candidate has shared in the CV, whether he or she might be the type of person who would be willing to move. Is the candidate accustomed to working away from home for long periods owing to the nature of his or her job specialization? Has the candidate relocated successfully in the past? There are governmental regulations stipulating what can and can't be shared, or expected to be shared in a CV. Always respect how a candidate presents him or herself and follow that as a guideline. The presentation, format and style of the CV can grant a great deal of insight. Consider the care and effort that has been invested and try to observe the choices in aesthetic appeal and structure. Has the CV been copy-edited? Is it riddled with spelling mistakes and poor formatting? Does the candidate evidence attention to detail? Does the format of the CV indicate a creative flair or is it standard procedure? Candidates often give a personal summary somewhere in the CV. It is a good idea to read this at the very last and to do so intuitively to get a deeper insight into the personality and natural characteristics of the candidate. This is so that you can remain impartial. Some candidates are good at talking about themselves and really shining a light on their inherent predisposition and nature, but it must always be grounded in the criteria appropriate to getting the job done. They must be able to walk the talk. Beware of your judgment being impaired by clever turns of phrase and wording. Enthusiasm and self-confidence are excellent attributes to have, so long as they are backed up by experience, achievements and contributions. Always frame everything relative to the specialization of the candidate, and if reading a CV against a specific job assignment, the KPIs, responsibilities and accountabilities of the position. When faced with a bulk influx of CVs, as is often the case when candidates are responding to an advertisement, it is best to begin with the bigger picture. Sort through the CVs looking at the critical information only, such as experience, companies, industries worked at, qualifications and track record, achievements and contributions to industry. Based on these criteria, group the CVs, Group A being the most likely candidates, B the secondary possibilities, and C being the least likely candidates. Go into detail with the A group first before moving on to the B candidates. Only if the groups A and B don't yield what you are looking for should you even need to consider Group C. It is sometimes wise to walk away from a candidate based on his or her reasons for leaving. In some cases it is wise and beneficial to your candidate to encourage him or her to stay put in the current position in order to make more decisive movements regarding career trajectory when the timing is simply not right.